The most dangerous person isn't the one screaming in the street. It's the one sitting quietly at dinner, smiling while their soul slowly leaves the room. If you are the strong one, the one who holds it all together while hiding your own empty room inside, you need to listen because your resilience might be the very thing that's killing you. There is a lie we tell ourselves about madness. We think it is a sudden explosion. We think it happens to people who are broken or fragile or weak, but that is not true. You don't go crazy because you are weak. You go crazy because you have been strong for too long. There was a boy once named Eli. He wasn't born angry. He wasn't born lost. He started off just like you, a child with wonder in his eyes, dreaming in color. But by the time the world was done with him, he was a cautionary tale. If you have ever felt like you are losing your grip, or that the world is getting too loud, or that the face you see in the mirror doesn't recognize you anymore, this isn't just Eli's story. It might be yours. And the most terrifying part, it didn't start with a scream. It started with silence. Let's look at the architecture of a breakdown, because to understand why the building collapses, you have to look at the foundation. For Eli, the foundation was a war zone disguised as a dinner table. His father would come home late, full of loud rage. His mother would disappear into a suffocating silence. Now, if you grew up in a house like this, you know the drill. You don't learn to play. You learn to survive. Eli learned to tiptoe. He memorized every creak in the floorboards, like he was navigating a field of landmines. But here is the thing that really damaged him. It wasn't the shouting. It wasn't even the fear. It was the denial. It was the forced smiles in public. It was the way no one ever looked at him and said, "Hey, something is wrong here." That gaslighting of reality became a poison. This is where the split begins. You see, the human mind is resilient, but it is not invincible. When trauma hits a child, it doesn't just sit in their memory like a bad movie. It embeds in the body. It warps the nervous system. It fundamentally rewires how you see the world, and tragically, how you see yourself. It teaches you that you are not safe, that you are not worthy, that you are not real. So, what does a smart child do? What did Eli do? He built a mask. As he grew, the mask grew with him. Eli became charming. He became funny. He learned to read the temperature of a room instantly and shapeshift into whatever people needed him to be. He was a master at it, but underneath, he was empty, hollow, like a room, abandoned, after a fire, walls still standing, but the soul was gone. This is the state many of us live in today. We are high-functioning, successful, together, but that is unprocessed trauma. It splits the self in two. And as Carl Jung said, the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. Eli inherited that tragedy, not just in his genetics, but in the silence, in the cold legacy of emotional neglect. He didn't go crazy in a flash. It was a slow burn. It started with the insomnia, the nagging feeling that something was always wrong, even when everything looked fine on paper. Then came the paranoia, the rage, the sudden self-hatred. Relationships turned into battlefields where he played both the soldier and the saboteur. He would push people away, then beg them to stay. Does that sound familiar? He tried to get help. He went to therapy once. He told the therapist, "I can't feel anything anymore. My dreams don't make sense. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I don't recognize the man staring back." And what did the world tell him? They gave him labels. Anxiety, depression. But labels are just stickers we put on jars we are afraid to open. Those labels couldn't touch the real monster, the buried pain he never learned to speak. Because here is the brutal truth. When trauma is ignored, it doesn't disappear. It waits. It ferments. And one day, it comes out. Maybe it looks like a breakdown. Maybe it looks like an addiction. Or maybe it looks like the sudden, terrifying silence of someone who used to laugh the loudest. For Eli, the dam finally broke. He began talking to himself, not just muttering. Full conversations, arguments, screams. He started walking past mirrors without blinking, afraid of what he might see. He carried a notebook everywhere, scribbling thoughts that looked like madness to anyone else. His friends whispered that he had changed, but the truth, he hadn't changed. He was always like this. He just ran out of energy to hide it. That is what no one tells you about going crazy. It is not madness. It is exhaustion. It is the soul giving up the performance. Think about the energy it takes to suppress a volcano for 30 years. When a person spends their whole life suppressing their wounds, their fears, and their trauma, eventually the psyche fractures. Why? Because the human mind is not a machine. It is a fragile tapestry of memories, emotions, beliefs, and meaning. And when too much of that tapestry is soaked in pain and silence, it begins to tear. This is when Eli started seeing things. He started believing the voices. He saw symbols in places that made no sense. He called them patterns. He thought the universe was speaking to him directly, not metaphorically, but literally. Every radio ad, every glance from a stranger, Every flicker of a light in a hallway became a coded message just for him. Now, from the outside, this looks like psychosis, but what was really happening? His mind, starved of order, was desperately creating meaning in the chaos. It was trying to make sense of what had never been resolved. That is the cruel trick of unresolved trauma. It doesn't let you rest. It disguises itself as anxiety, as anger, and sometimes even as mystical insight. But behind all the complex delusions, behind the conspiracy theories of the mind, is just a child screaming, "Please notice me, save me, help me." But by then, usually, it is too late, because the world doesn't understand madness. It fears it. It turns it into a spectacle. And Eli, like so many others, became another statistic, another what went wrong. But we need to stop there, because if we leave the story there, it's just a tragedy. And this isn't just a tragedy, it's a map. Carl Jung had another word for this process. He didn't call it madness. He called it individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming whole by facing the dark, chaotic parts of the self. But for someone like Eli, and maybe for someone like you, it doesn't feel noble. It feels like drowning. It feels like being pulled into the depths of something ancient and terrifying. It speaks in symbols, fragments, and screams behind closed doors. You don't just lose your mind one day. It happens slowly, like a soft crack in a mirror that spiderwebs over time. From the outside, they say he snapped, but they didn't see the years before. They didn't see the parts that weren't loud, the nights that were silent, the moments no one else was there for. Here is the mechanism. When you bury the past, you don't kill it. You multiply it. Unhealed trauma becomes a ghost. And ghosts don't die. They haunt. Eli wasn't just dealing with memories. He was carrying the entire emotional weight of years of abandonment, confusion, shame, and unspoken grief. Every moment he stayed silent as a child screamed back at him as an adult. This is where the line between sanity and insanity begins to blur. In psychology, we talk about the false self. This is the version of you created to survive, not to live, not to thrive, just to survive. This false self wears masks. It tells people what they want to hear. It buries the truth so deep that even you forget it is there. But the truth doesn't forget you. One day, the mask cracks. The persona cannot hold the weight anymore. And when it shatters, what is left? Just the shadow. The side you never wanted to meet. The rage you said wasn't yours. The grief you claimed didn't matter. The voice inside you that whispered you were never loved the way you needed to be. This is what going crazy really is. It is not an illness in the traditional sense. It is not demonic. It is not even irrational. It is the human psyche breaking under the weight of pretending. Madness is the soul's protest. It is the scream of a mind that has been silenced for too long. And in a strange, painful way, it is also a chance. Because when everything collapses, when the lies fall away, when the mask shatters, and when the world no longer makes sense, you are finally left with the one thing that might save you, the truth. But the truth is not pretty. Eli's truth was this. He was abused. He was neglected. He was never seen for who he really was. And for years, he told himself it didn't matter, but it did. It always did. Carl Jung believed that healing begins when the unconscious is made conscious, that the very act of looking at your darkness, not running from it, but looking at it, is the beginning of redemption. But here is the hard part. Looking at your past means feeling everything you worked so hard not to feel, and that is terrifying, because beneath the numbness, beneath the madness, is something even scarier to a survivor. Vulnerability. To go into your shadow, you must become soft again. You must grieve. And grief is a kind of death. So how did Eli start to climb out of the pit? He began to write, not for clarity, not for a bestseller, just to get the poison out. The pages were chaotic, scribbles, drawings, sometimes just the same sentence repeated 50 times. I didn't deserve this. That sentence changed him, not because it gave him peace, but because it gave him permission. Permission to finally be angry, to be sad, to feel. And in that mess, he found something he hadn't touched in years: hope. Real healing doesn't begin with motivation or a positive mindset. It begins with honesty, and honesty begins in pain. Eli went back to therapy, but this time, the goal changed. He didn't try to be impressive. He didn't try to be smart or spiritual or fixed. He just wept. He wept for the child who grew up too fast. He wept for the adult who never felt safe. He wept for the madness that finally made sense once he stopped running from it. He wasn't cured instantly, but he wasn't lost anymore. He learned that the madness was never the enemy. It was a message. It was a cry for attention from the parts of himself that had been locked away in the basement. And when he finally opened the door, those parts didn't attack him. They thanked him, because now he was finally listening. So, I am speaking to you now. If you have ever felt like you are going crazy, if the world feels too loud and you feel too broken, know this: you are not broken, you are buried. And healing is not becoming someone new. It is remembering who you were before the pain taught you to forget. How do you begin? Start with silence, not the numb silence of disconnection that you grew up with, but the sacred silence of listening. Write, scream, walk, cry, but do it consciously. Do it without shame. Read books that go beyond just treating the symptoms. Read the books that dive into the unconscious. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert A. Johnson. The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. These aren't just books, they are mirrors. They won't give you easy answers, but they will give you permission to ask the real questions. And most of all, don't heal to be perfect. Heal so you can be real. Heal so you can look in the mirror and recognize the one looking back. Because the world doesn't need more masks. It needs more people who have survived their shadow and come back with the truth. If this story resonated with you, you aren't alone. Check the description for the resources mentioned. And if you are ready to take the next step, watch this video next.